Good evening. Reimagining news. I've taken the liberty to interpret the topic a little differently, as against a practitioner's version of telling you as to how we reimagine our news products and services to cope with an extremely challenging environment that we operate in. I will try to leave you with three key issues that news faces that I hope will force you to reimagine news in the context of your own lives. At the outset, let me start by underscoring the relevance and role of news itself. Human society is a gigantic mind. We hear about the approaching singularity of machines. I think that singularity already exists. The interconnected social systems that pervades everything that we do is actually a gigantic mind. And all that the gigantic mind experiences is news. News connects the component individual minds and creates the essential homogeneity that is required for the universal mind to function. While education prepares the blank child mind to bring it on par with the individual component minds, the other minds, news does the lifelong function of bringing us all up to speed with each other. News enables us to participate, collaborate, and innovate. No progress is possible without news. What is not news to you does not exist. And the corollary, what is made news for you is what is most valuable to you. News, as you can see, is of critical importance. I'm stating the obvious here because I worry that it is not really obvious to many of us. News is left to a small bunch of news professionals like us. There is little discourse about news itself, even as there is an explosion of discourses on all our channels and platforms about everything else in the name of daily news. After a fairly long, stable tech environment for news of about 200 years, when news was centrally broadcasted, first as newspapers, then as radio and television, the last 2 decades have seen a paradigm change in the way news operates. I visualize traditional broadcasting as similar to a city's water supply system, a central source and pumping system that pushes similar news to all households on the grid. Digital distribution, however, has a slightly different mechanism. It operates more like an organic jungle system of watering holes, the data servers. Thirsty animals come to the source and drink what they want. There is no push force. That is substituted by search and find. So far, so good. It's a new mechanism, so existing news players can adapt to it, and all of us have, and it is working. Traditional broadcast brands such as Economist, CNN, Washington Post, Times of India, NDTV, and our own Times Now have taken to the new medium quite well, and we are doing pretty good. Consumers have rewarded these dependable brands with loyalty irrespective of the way the medium works. The real challenge, however, has come from other collateral changes this new mechanism has unleashed. And these constitute 2 of the 3 elephants in the room that I am going to talk about. These changes, I must concede, are not entirely negative. All that is needed is to understand their ramifications and view them through new lenses. The need to reimagine news. First, the internet converts every device on it into a potential server. Without realizing, each one of us became a watering hole. With advances in cameras, in editing and presentation systems, in speech software and text software, our watering holes have become interesting. And social media gave us a whole new set of wings. The positive side of this ability to publish is the opportunity it offers individuals to directly reach out to others without the cumbersome and sometimes limiting filter of media platforms. Mass outreach is today possible without coding major media platforms such as us. Donald Trump has 55 million followers on Twitter, which gives him the strength to brush aside global news brands. Narendra Modi's social media reach is larger than the social media reach of the top 3 English news brands in the country, namely Times of India, NDTV, and Times Now put together. This obviously is a great source of power for these leaders. This strengthens democracy as it offers individuals immense potential. The majority of us use this new power without complex intentions. The power, however, can be misused by vested interests to manipulate or simply subvert. Fake news, deliberate and unintended, have grave consequences. It's all the more dangerous when we realize that the news consumer is still driven by an almost 200-year-old habit of trusting the published word. While technology has leapfrogged, the same cannot be expected of the human brain. Branded media could lose its business, its net worth, and the shirt off its back if they did a hoax piece and got caught. What do anonymous social media jockeys have to lose? Worse still is the propagation by message apps with no address of source. Regulation and consumer education has to urgently adapt. This is an elephant in the room that has been spotted and called out and hopefully will be corralled. In the context of digital news, the most critical issue besides fake news that needs to be confronted is the concentration of power and therefore potential threat that search and social intermediaries can pose. This probably is the biggest of the 3 elephants in the room, in any room that discusses news, and it is not yet called out in the way that it should be. As a news practitioner, I can tell you one thing: ensuring that my news gets to your screen before my competitors is not as simple as it looks. Behind your seemingly in-control act of choosing my channel and staying tuned is a very complex, big data-driven initiative that we undertake. Your choice is always influenced by a series of invisible steps that we take in the background in terms of placement, distribution, visibility, etc. And I'm talking about traditional broadcast. This gets magnified many times over when it comes to the digital medium. And when the set of algorithms that determine what comes up, the whole search mechanism is owned by monolithic multinational corporations which may not be under the ambit of local regulations, you can well imagine the threat that it can pose. Make no mistake, I am not blaming them of willful subversion. They have robust systems to ensure fair play. But concentrating power of this nature can have unintended, disastrous consequences. Today's search rules of Google or Facebook can overnight change which news brand gets watched over others. Third-party platforms that wield such absolute power thus determine survival itself for news players and can be dangerous to democracy. The third point, and the last one that I think needs examination, is the excessive reliance of this business, the news business, on ad revenue. This obviously matters only for what is called paid media, probably actually the most trustworthy and agenda-free amongst all news operators. Ad revenue has been a traditional source of revenue right from the day of the newspaper for media and has worked quite well at the social level too. But in the current highly fragmented and hyper-competitive environment, excessive reliance on ad sales for news pose some serious problems. This is more pronounced in the Indian context as Western and more developed markets have a sizable component of subscription revenue for their news businesses. Advertisers obviously spend on what they consider important to their business. Their target groups are most times younger, for obviously higher so-called lifetime value of customer, and more economically capable for obvious reasons. There is thus a young and rich bias in their audience selection. The corollary to this is that no content manager pursues you if you are old and poor. This can over time lead to the exclusion of their interest in news media and disenfranchise large portions of the population, especially in countries such as ours. When public broadcasters like Prasar Bharati are doing work towards fulfilling this gap, we need to develop a culture of paid subscription for news. Consumers need to become aware that news paid by others may not be in their interest in the long run. To circle back on the three issues that need thought and deliberation by all and not just us news professionals. First one, fake news is a social problem. While a lot is being done, this will pose serious threats for a long time as consumer habit of trusting published word is strong and lasting. We need to start providing consumers mechanisms to cope. Second, search and social monopolies could pose risks to the industry as a whole. This is an evolving situation. We hope technology itself will provide the solution to the same. The industry also needs to come together and approach this as a common problem. And third one, subscription culture needs to be developed for news products in India. This is the larger interest of all constituents, mainly the consumer. News needs to be recognized as far more important and strategically impacting than it currently is. Marketing in this area is lacking and could be a solution. I hope I've been able to give you some perspectives on reimagining news in the current environment. Your views and contributions are welcome. I'm sure you can reach out to me on Twitter or email that the organizers can direct you to. Thank you for being an attentive audience.